Welcome back. This is lesson number 9, and this is an important one. It's about how you effectively present the information you found and analyzed so painstakingly by following the steps I've walked you through in the earlier lessons. And the best presentation format, in my view, is what I call the analytical thematic index. So in this lesson, I want to show you first the 4 types of indexes that are currently used by law firms. And then I want to show you why I think the analytical thematic format is the best. And I want to give you an example of how you can craft an analytical thematic index by using the case of Jay from Cameroon as an example. Finally, actually, I want to end by offering some really practical tips and recommendations that I've collected over the last 10 years. So here you see 2 kinds of index formats, which I've seen a number of attorneys use. The first is the format arranged by source type, where sources are grouped according to the type they belong to. So all government publications will go under a tab that says government reports, and then all NGO reports will go under NGOs, and so on. The second format is the chronological format, where newest sources come first, and then the second newest, and the third newest, and so on. My assessment of these 2 is that both source type and chronologically organized indexes can easily bury the key sources or statements that support your client's claims. And so they can really bury the key claims from the source, the key information from the sources in a way that where the adjudicator just doesn't see everything that's important. And I don't tend to use them for these reasons. I don't use these formats. I also see 2 additional formats that I think are much better, of course. We have the thematic format, where sources are grouped under themes of persecution. So that can be a number of things. It can be the claims of persecution, or it can be more general themes like gender violence, or it can indigenous discrimination, and so on. The fourth format is what I call the analytical thematic format. And this format arranges the material thematically, just like the thematic format, but in addition, it very carefully analyzes the information in the sources in light of the asylum seekers' purported grounds for asylum and any other relevant statements. And of course, I think the analytical thematic format is the best for a number of reasons. It clearly separates out the different grounds or themes of persecution, and how those themes are supported by the evidence. And that to me is both thematic and analytical. This format highlights the most salient and concrete information that addresses the client's particular claims within each theme, which of course is a very analytical exercise. And then it gives objective backing to the client's statements as expressed in their claims and in their sworn declaration. It intentionally identifies and mitigates any potential adverse information or seeming inconsistencies. And so those are some of the reasons I think the analytical thematic format is the best. And now I want to show you an index, an example of how this can work in practice, or how you can craft this kind of index in practice by using the case of Jay from Cameroon as an example. As always, when drafting and writing an index, keep in mind your questions, keep in mind your legal theory, which again, ideally, you'll have written down already in a draft index. In Jay's case, I just want to remind you, I had questions and I wrote them down, and I'm not going to go over them again because I've already gone over them. But anyway, these are the questions that I started out with when I started the research on this case. So what I did here was I basically turned those questions into tabs or main headings. And already those tabs or main headings acted as answers to the questions. And as I did the research, as I conducted the research, as I collected sources, found information, analyzed it, and so on, I had to modify the tab headings to appear as clear, detailed, and concrete as possible, to highlight information in the order of importance, and to provide a user-friendly roadmap for the adjudicator that'll lead him or her to the destination where they say, oh yeah, I can totally see how all these themes lead up to persecution. In this case, you can see how I turned 3 questions that I started out with into 2 tabs, and how those tabs really provide answers to those questions. I'm not going to go over them here. I don't think that's necessary, because you can, again, download the PowerPoint and you can find this in the research guide. So I'll move on. In this case, there was a lot of information that helped me answer the questions. And to really highlight all of it, all that I wanted to highlight, it was necessary to break down some of the main tabs or main headings into sub-tabs or subheadings. Otherwise, I felt the nuances would risk getting lost. And I think most cases are nuanced. So in most cases, I recommend that you break down your main tabs into sub-tabs. I think that doing this can also help, to use the roadmap metaphor, help the adjudicator to take some additional stops to really let the information sink in step by step. So in the case of Jay from Cameroon, you can see here how I broke down tab A into 4 different sub-tabs, simply because I felt the information that I found and analyzed, its nuances would just get lost if I just had one tab. So again, these 4 sub-tabs help me answer the questions in a much more clear manner. And a final note on this slide. All these 4 sub-tabs, all these are basically summaries and syntheses of all the information from the sources that I used. So they're very analytical, and I'm very intentional about making them appear as answers. Right, so you've done, or I've done my main tabs, I've done my sub-tabs. Now what I want to do, or what I did, is just add the excerpts that I've selected and put them under the appropriate tab or sub-tab. So here's an example of one source that, or one excerpt or a couple excerpts that I placed under this sub-tab that's called "Cameroon is run by a de facto authoritarian government." I don't think I need to read it out loud. I think it's self-explanatory. And here's another example to just kind of let that sink in. Again, this is in the research guide, so there's really no need to go into any detail here. I do want to emphasize, though, that you can see here that I have highlighted in bold the key terms from the excerpts, and I did that because those are the terms that I want the adjudicator to see first. Those are the absolutely key, most essential statements in the excerpts, and that's why I highlight them. Finally, I want to end this lesson by sharing some practical writing tips. 6, to be more specific. First, when you draft and you write, always follow a consistent style or template. Feel free to use what I just showed you as a template, but at a minimum, I recommend the following. Tab heading should always formulate the information in the sources that demonstrates persecution or risk of persecution. It should almost read like a small story or a narrative. Subtabs or subheadings should further specify that information. Sources should always be cited in the same style. Margins, spacing between quotations or quotes, font size, font should always be the same and consistent. Second, highlight the strongest information first. So tab A, subtab A, then the second strongest, tab B, and so on and so on. Third, if one source has information on 2 or more themes, or it answers 2 or more questions, excerpt information separately under separate tabs, the tabs where it would make most sense to put that information. 4, always check and double check for minor errors. Check for typos, check for broken hyperlinks, correct page numbers. 5, if your source is over 30 pages, only print what is directly relevant to your case. 6, this is the final tip, make your sources reader-friendly, especially if you have news sources that have ads. Those can be really hard to read for adjudicators, so you can go to this website called printfriendly.com, and if you plug in the URL to a news article, for example, it will remove all the ads and such and keep the text only. So that's very useful, I found. And that's it for this lesson. You can now move on to the next lesson. We're almost there, and I promise you the last 2 lessons will be much less intense.